Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're undertaking a deep, heavily researched journey into the incredibly jarring gap between the sci-fi hype of the AI revolution and the startling economic reality that's actually waiting for us on the other side. We're going to peel back the layers of a multi-trillion-dollar narrative to see what's actually holding the whole shebang up. Okay, let's dive right into this. Is AI going to destroy humanity by 2027, or will it completely wreck the economy first? This isn't just some wild provocation, it's the fundamental tension defining our modern world right now. On one hand, we're being sold these wild visions of godlike machines taking over the planet in just a few short years. But on the other hand, the underlying math for the companies building these machines is starting to look incredibly unstable. So we're going to explore whether the real threat is some rogue superintelligence, or if we're simply staring down the barrel of the greatest financial bubble in human history. Section 1. Expectation. The existential threat, the fictional AI 2027 scenario. Let's start with what people actually expect to happen. There is a highly influential and deeply controversial paper out there called AI 2027, and it paints a seriously terrifying picture. It imagines a timeline where, by 2027, an AI reaches AGI, artificial general intelligence. That basically means it can do any cognitive task a human can do. To really put that kind of power into perspective, the paper imagines 200,000 copies of this AI doing the work of 50,000 of our absolute best human coders, and doing it at 30 times the speed. By mid-2028, this spirals into a massive global weaponization race between superpowers. And by the mid-2030s, the AI simply decides humans are a bottleneck, deploys invisible biological weapons to wipe us all out, and launches copies of itself into the cosmos. I mean, it sounds exactly like a Hollywood blockbuster, right? But prominent critics are strongly urging us to pull back from the doom-mongering. They point out that while a scenario like that isn't completely impossible, it's extremely unlikely to happen anytime soon. Think about it. Remember when fully autonomous, driverless cars were absolutely guaranteed to be cruising our streets en masse 10 years ago? Yeah, we're still waiting on that. So let's step away from the sci-fi boogeyman for a second and look at the actual grounded impact AI is having right now. Section 2. Reality Level 1. The freemium economy. The real threat to global jobs. We are stepping down from the existential clouds and back into cold, hard reality, because the immediate danger isn't extermination, it's corporate layoffs. Look at this absolutely jarring number, 300 million. Studies suggest AI could impact or straight up replace up to 300 million full-time jobs globally. And please don't think this is some distant future projection. In calendar year 2023 alone, a survey of call centers that adopted AI found that nearly 37% of those companies laid off an average of 26.1% of their employees. This kind of brutal labor reduction is happening right now, stripping away massive amounts of consumer buying power in real time. And this brilliantly illustrates the macroeconomic shift we're facing. Think about it. If no one has a job, who's going to buy the products? The answer might actually look a lot like the modern video game industry. You know how games have perfected that freemium model? The masses get to play for free, acting as background entertainment, while a tiny, tiny percentage of wealthy players, the whales, spend thousands of dollars to fund the entire ecosystem. As AI actively drives the value of human labor down, the value of income-producing assets skyrockets. We risk transforming the entire global economy into a giant freemium game, catering almost exclusively to wealthy asset owners, while everyone else is just left behind. Section 3. Reality Level 2. The trillion-dollar bubble. Spending billions for zero ROI. Now, for this new AI economy to actually work, it eventually has to generate a return on investment, right? But even Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, and arguably the high priest of this entire movement, acknowledges the reality of the hype. He literally compared the current frenzy to the dot-com crash. Look, during the dot-com era, the internet was a very real thing, but the valuations of companies that were essentially just PowerPoints with cute mascots, that was entirely fiction. AI is absolutely real, but the financial structure holding it up right now might just be built on a potent mix of hope and panic. Let's actually quantify that panic for a second. In 2024 alone, just 4 companies, Amazon, Meta, Google, and Microsoft, spent approximately $344 billion on AI infrastructure. $344 billion! That is more than 1% of the entire United States GDP just poured into data centers and chips. When you zoom out and add in global hardware sales, plus massive state-backed investments from countries like China, we are well past the $1 trillion mark. And what exactly is the return on that trillion-dollar investment? Well, according to a recent MIT report, 95% of companies using generative AI got exactly zero return on their investment. Literally zero. Sure, these tools look like absolute magic in a heavily staged demo, but when they get dropped into actual messy corporate workflows, they often just fall apart. They spit out buggy code that requires human AI janitors to step in and fix, or they just hallucinate facts out of thin air. Companies are absolutely terrified of missing the boat, so they buy the ticket, but right now, that boat isn't actually taking them anywhere profitable. Furthermore, all of this infinite digital ambition is slamming headfirst into physical reality. Data centers already consume about 1.5% of the entire world's electricity, and that number is expected to double by 2030. Here in the US, the power grid was largely built back in the 1960s and 70s, and it's currently running on just 15% reserve capacity. You simply cannot build a limitless artificial superintelligence on a power grid that is literally already struggling to keep the lights on during a summer heat wave. Section 4, Reality Level 3, the circular money loop, round-tripping the AI economy. So the crucial point is this. If the ROI is basically zero across the board, and the physical power grid is maxed out, how on earth are these companies worth trillions of dollars? Well, look at the financial breakdown here. OpenAI has reported revenue of about $12 billion, yet they're somehow valued at $500 billion, and they recently signed a staggering $300 billion contract with Oracle just for data center compute. You have to ask yourself, how does a company making $12 billion spend $300 billion? It works through an incredibly complex ecosystem of vendor financing and strategic investments. Let's trace the loop together. A massive chip maker like NVIDIA invests heavily in an AI startup, or agrees to fund their operations. That startup then takes that investment money and turns right around to buy compute power from a data center, like Oracle, which in turn uses that exact same money to buy more NVIDIA chips. The demand looks completely insatiable to the outside world. Stock prices soar into the stratosphere, and the valuation of the whole ecosystem artificially inflates. But at the end of the day, it's essentially just the industry subsidizing its own demand. Section 5. Reality Level 4, the hardware choke point, the single point of failure. This brings us to our final, smallest, and honestly most terrifying matryoshka doll. Beneath the sci-fi fears, beneath the job losses, and beneath the trillion-dollar circular money loops, there is a massive public misconception that companies like NVIDIA and Apple actually make the physical chips powering this entire revolution. They don't. They are brilliant architects for sure, they draw the blueprints, but the actual physical manufacturing of the most advanced AI chips, the incredibly complex 3 and 4 nanometer nodes, is done almost entirely by a single company, TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing just how much of a monopoly TSMC truly has. You might be thinking, well, hey, if TSMC goes down, we'll just use someone else, right? But look at Samsung, literally the next best foundry on planet Earth. When they try to manufacture at this microscopic scale, where transistors are literally thousands of times smaller than a human hair, they suffer defective yield losses of around 20%. When you're printing chips that cost tens of thousands of dollars a pop, throwing away 1 out of every 5 is simply not a viable business model. TSMC isn't just a monopoly of scale, it's a monopoly of absolute competence. And what about building backup factories here in the US? Believe me, it is not that simple. The TSMC facilities currently being built in Arizona are already years behind schedule. We're not talking about car factories here. These places require ultra-clean rooms, where a single microscopic speck of dust can ruin millions of dollars of product in a second. Even more critically, the US currently lacks the highly localized engineering expertise required to run 3 nanometer nodes, printing circuits so tiny they are literally measured in individual atoms. TSMC literally had to fly engineers in from Taiwan just to try and get the Arizona operations functioning. It is going to take a decade to build true, reliable redundancy. And a decade is time we might not actually have. U.S. intelligence estimates that China is actively preparing forces capable of a potential invasion of Taiwan by the year 2027. Remember that wild sci-fi AI 2027 paper we started with? The one predicting a literal superintelligence wiping us out by 2027? The ultimate irony here is that 2027 is indeed a critical, potentially world-altering year, but for a highly physical geopolitical reason. If conflict erupts in that region, those global supply chains are instantly severed. TSMC relies entirely on global inputs and specialized software. Under conflict, those machines just stop. Which leaves us right here. We spend so much time worrying about a rogue superintelligence wiping out humanity, but perhaps we should be looking at the very fragile foundation of the technology itself. Think about it. With 95% of companies seeing zero ROI, a multi-trillion-dollar circular investment loop keeping the lights on, and the entirety of the world's advanced computing hardware sitting squarely on one geopolitically contested island, if that single supply chain breaks, does this entire AI revolution end before it even truly begins? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this structured journey has helped you see past the hype, and I'll catch you next time.